Before we begin, a quick note. The opinions and analysis shared on Truth Seekers are our own interpretations of published research and should not be used as medical, financial, or professional advice. Always consult qualified professionals for decisions affecting your health or well-being.
And with that out of the way, welcome to Truth Seekers. I'm Bill Morrison.
And I'm Alex Barrett. Today is December 3rd, 2025, and we're talking about, can muscle really keep your brain young?
Let's get to the truth.
Right, so everywhere I look this week, it's the same headline. Having more muscle keeps your brain young. And honestly, brilliant. Who wouldn't want that? Hit the gym, save your brain from aging. Sorted.
I saw those too. Can exercise turn back the clock on your brain? New study says yes. Which, if true, would be incredible news.
But you're about to tell me it's not that simple, aren't you?
Let's just say the study and the headlines are telling very different stories. So, this research comes from Washington University, presented at a radiology conference in November 2025. They looked at about 1,164 healthy adults, did whole body MRI scans, and found that people with more muscle mass had what they call younger looking brains on the scans.
Okay, so people with more muscle have brains that appear younger on MRI. That does sound like it supports the headline, no?
Here's the thing, this is what we call a cross-sectional study. They took one snapshot in time of these people. They measured their muscle mass, their belly fat, and their brain structure all at the same moment and looked for correlations.
Hang on, so they didn't actually follow people over time. They didn't have anyone build muscle and then see if their brains changed.
Exactly. No intervention, no follow up, no before and after. Just a single measurement showing that at this one point in time, people who happened to have more muscle also happened to have brains that appeared structurally younger on the scans.
But that's completely different from proving that building muscle keeps your brain young. That's like noticing that people who own fancy watches tend to be on time and concluding that buying a watch will make you punctual.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. Correlation doesn't equal causation, and with cross sectional data, we can't determine which direction the relationship goes, or if there's something else causing both things.
Right, because people who have more muscle probably also do 1,000 other things differently. They exercise regularly, they likely eat better, they might sleep better, manage stress better.
Absolutely. And here's what really gets me, the study doesn't control for socioeconomic status. People who have the time, money, and knowledge to maintain muscle mass also tend to have better healthcare access, better nutrition options, lower chronic stress, higher education levels. All of those things independently affect brain health.
So we've got no way to know if it's the muscle itself or just that people with muscle are generally healthier in ways that happen to include their brains.
Right. And there's another layer here that's actually pretty concerning. The whole study is based on this brain age measurement, an AI algorithm that looks at your brain scan and predicts how old your brain appears to be.
Which sounds quite scientific, to be fair.
It does, until you look at the recent research questioning whether this actually measures what we think it measures. There was a major study published in PLOS Biology in October 2025, so just before this muscle study was presented, that found these brain age models might primarily reflect stable individual differences rather than actual biological aging.
Wait, say that again in normal person language.
Basically, your brain might just naturally look a certain way because of how you're built, not because it's aging faster or slower. The AI might be picking up on structural differences between people that were always there, not capturing who's actually experiencing accelerated brain aging.
Oh, so the entire foundation of this study, that a younger looking brain on an MRI means your brain is actually staying young, that itself is questionable.
The researchers who did that PLOS biology study found that the models that were best at predicting someone's chronological age were actually worse at detecting disease related brain changes. The accuracy of age prediction and clinical usefulness might be inversely related.
That's quite a problem for a study that's built entirely on predicting brain age.
And here's something else that bothered me when I dug into this. The study didn't actually measure cognitive function. No memory tests, no assessment of whether these people with younger brains actually think better or have lower dementia risk.
Sorry, they measured brain structure but didn't test whether anyone's brain actually works better.
Correct. We don't know if having a structurally younger appearing brain on an MRI translates to better memory, sharper thinking, or protection against cognitive decline. The study ends at the scan.
This is reminding me of when I was working in news and we'd get these press releases that sounded incredible. And then you'd look at the actual research and realize the story and the science were miles apart.
And in this case, the researchers themselves are actually pretty careful about their claims. The lead researcher, Dr. Raji, said in the press release that this study validates widely held hypotheses and provides a foundation for those biomarkers to be included in future trials. Future trials. He's explicitly saying this needs to be tested with interventions.
So the researchers are saying, this is interesting, we should test this properly. And the media translated that into exercise keeps your brain young, full stop.
Exactly. And there's one more thing. This hasn't even been published in a peer reviewed journal yet. It was presented as a conference abstract. Peer review would likely catch a lot of these limitations and require additional caveats.
But everyone's already read the headline and moved on, thinking they know what the science says.
Right. And look, I'm not saying the association isn't real. There probably is a correlation between body composition and brain structure. Visceral fat, that deep belly fat, is metabolically active, promotes inflammation, and that could affect the brain.
So there's some truth here. It's just not what the headlines claim.
There's definitely truth. We know from actual intervention studies that exercise can benefit the brain. Aerobic exercise, cardiovascular fitness, there's good evidence for those. But this particular study doesn't prove that building muscle or losing belly fat will make your brain younger.
Because it could just as easily be that healthier people, including people with healthier brains to start with, are more motivated and able to maintain muscle mass. The causation could run the opposite direction.
Or there could be genetic factors that influence both traits. Or it could be entirely about the behaviors associated with having muscle, not the muscle itself. With a cross sectional snapshot, we just can't tell.
What about people who are reading these headlines and thinking, right, I'll hit the gym and that'll protect me from dementia? Is that harmful advice?
That's the tricky part. Exercise is genuinely good for you, including for your brain. So the advice to be physically active isn't wrong. But the problem is people think they're following proven science when they're actually following speculation.
And when people later hear that it doesn't work the way they thought, they lose trust in health recommendations generally. It's the retractions never getting the same attention as the sensational claims.
Exactly. And in this case, there are so many uncontrolled variables. The study doesn't account for diet quality, sleep, smoking, alcohol use, physical activity levels separate from muscle mass, cognitive engagement, or underlying health conditions. Any of those could explain the association.
This is also assuming the 1,164 people they studied are representative. Who were these people?
They were described as healthy adults with a mean age of about 55, no cognitive impairment, no dementia diagnosis. So they specifically excluded the elderly and people with existing cognitive decline, exactly the populations we'd most want to understand if we're talking about preventing brain aging.
So even if we could prove causation in this group, we wouldn't know if it applies to the people who actually need the intervention most.
Right, there's a selection bias baked into the sample.
What should people actually take away from this? Because I imagine there are listeners who saw these headlines and have been genuinely worried about their brain health.
I think the real takeaway is learning to recognize this pattern. When you see headlines claiming that X causes Y, check if it's actually an intervention study or just an observational correlation. Did researchers actually change X and measure what happened to Y? Or did they just notice that people with more X tend to have different Y?
And if it's the latter, remember that correlation doesn't tell you causation. And there are probably confounding factors that explain both things.
The other thing is to look for whether cognitive outcomes were actually measured. A lot of these brain studies measure brain structure or brain activity, but never check if that translates to how well people actually think or remember. Structure is interesting, but function is what actually matters for your life.
And maybe check if the researchers themselves are making the causal claim, or if the media added that part.
In this case, Dr. Raji was clear that this validates hypotheses that need testing in future trials. The science was appropriately cautious. The translation to headlines was where causation got invented.
This is why I got so frustrated with journalism, honestly. The actual science is interesting enough. We found a correlation worth investigating. But that doesn't get clicks like keep your brain young with this one weird trick.
And when I was in tech, I saw how easy it is to use statistics to persuade rather than inform. You can take a real correlation and present it in a way that implies causation without technically lying. It's just deeply misleading.
So, for anyone listening who wants to support their brain health, and honestly, who doesn't, what does the actual evidence support?
Regular physical activity, particularly aerobic exercise, does have good evidence from intervention trials. Cardiovascular fitness matters. A healthy diet, good sleep, social engagement, cognitive challenges, those all have support. Managing cardiovascular risk factors like high blood pressure and diabetes is important.
But build muscle to keep your brain young is ahead of the evidence.
It's worth studying, absolutely. The hypothesis is reasonable. But this cross sectional study doesn't prove it. And people deserve to know the difference between we found an interesting correlation and we proved this intervention works.
Next time you see a headline about a body trait that keeps your brain young, or any headline claiming X causes Y, pause and ask, did they actually intervene and change X? Or did they just notice people with X tend to have Y?
That one question will help you see through a huge amount of misleading health news.
And maybe we'll all be a bit less susceptible to the next sensational claim that's really just an interesting correlation in disguise.
Your brain will thank you for the critical thinking, regardless of your muscle mass.
Right, that's all for today's dive into the data. Just remember, everything we've discussed is our interpretation of published research and shouldn't replace professional medical advice.
Absolutely. If you're dealing with health or mental concerns, talk to your doctor, not just us data nerds on a podcast.
I'm Alex Barrett,
And I'm Bill Morrison
and we'll see you next time.
on Truth Seekers,
Until then, question everything.
but verify with data.